Kirsten Rudberg. How are you?
I'm good and excited to be here today.
Excellent. I'm so glad that you're able to come on and share your story with the audience. You do quite a few things, so I think it'll be very informational for the creative community.
I am a little lazy, yes,
Slightly, slightly.
likely.
Let me give the audience a brief introduction here for you before we dive in so they get a feel for who you are. You are an author, a screenwriter, a producer, podcaster, and multidisciplinary creative. As an author, you've written a series of reimagined children's books, such as a rewrite of the Peter Rabbit universe, followed by The Nut Guts, A Squirrel Nut Can Redo, and a third book exploring a twisted version of The Tailor of Gloucester. As a screenwriter, you've created and written a short film series such as The Murder of Two, a series of short films described as a crow's eye view of the folly and foibles of humanity. As producer, you have a production company, Immortal Coil Productions, named in honor of Nikola Tesla, as you oversee multi-creative projects, including your podcast, as well as other animated and film work. As a podcaster, you host the bi-weekly podcast Bite-Sized Blessings, which explores stories of magic, miracles, and transformative moments in forms of a major part of your creative platform. And as the multidisciplinary creative, you describe yourself as a polymath in the creative process, weaving myth, folklore, spirituality, and social justice into your authorship, screenwriting, and audio work. As we said, you are a little bit lazy.
Phew. Yes.
Oh, man. That was quite a few things that you have going on and have done over the course of a short lifespan.
Yeah, I know. I mean, sometimes I just forget about all of it until someone let you bring it up and talk about it. And I think, oh, yeah, I did that. Because sometimes I meet people and they say, what do you do? What have you done? And I'm like, nothing. I don't really do. I don't know. What am I doing? What am I doing with my life? And then I come on shows and you, Rich, are reminding me that I've actually done something. So thank you.
Yes, you have. You have. And I tried to take that pressure off of guests because I know what that's like when people ask me the same question, like, what do you do? I'm like, which one do you want me to pick from?
Yeah.
Exactly. So, like I mentioned, I don't have a whole lot of structure except for my very first question. And that is, where were you born and what was life like as a kid for Kirsten?
Oh gosh. So I was born in Illinois a long time ago in a galaxy far away,
Nice.
many, many moons ago. And because of my father's job, he worked for a company in Chicago that did hydroelectric dams and irrigation systems for developing countries.
Okay.
We lived overseas. So immediately, well, maybe a year after I was born, we moved to South America. So I lived in Guyana for a couple of years. Then we came back to the States for about a year or so, maybe more, I think 2 years, and then we went to Pakistan, and I lived in Pakistan for about 4 years. I thought that was what kids did and that life was normal and that, oh, yes, you travel all over the world and you go to these strange places for vacation and what have you. So when I came back to the States and we popped back in to the middle of Illinois, the Midwest, I mean, I just have to tell you, I mean, it was such a culture shock and
Yeah.
so disturbing because I went from a school in Pakistan that had kids from all over the world, everywhere, Germany, Vietnam, Canada, to all of a sudden I was plopped into Illinois and everybody was white. You know, not there's nothing wrong with that, but as a kid, when you're used to a certain kind of
Yeah.
way of being in the world, it was just shocking. And then, what you brought to lunch meant where you were in the pecking order for the hierarchy. Did you wear Jordache jeans? Did you wear Isa? I mean, it threw me into this world where I did not understand the rules. There were all these rules that were like different and new. And overseas in Pakistan, please, you could wear whatever you wanted. Nobody cared. But yeah, my mom made a big mistake, as I've told that story before. She sent us on our first day of school to the grade school in Pakistani clothing. Okay, so just tell me
Oh,
how popular we were. I mean, it was like the kiss of death,
oh
the
man.
kiss of death for any sort of social, like anything. So
Right.
yeah, I mean, I it was with the best of intentions. We didn't have any Western clothes yet.
Okay.
So yeah, yeah, that kind of marked me forever.
I can imagine. Oh man. I know how self-conscious I was in elementary school of the clothes that I wore because we weren't it's hard to decipher at that point in time whether you're poor or you're middle class or whatever. You just get whatever is put on you basically.
Yeah.
Um, but I know we didn't have a whole lot of money because I didn't get new clothes very often. But I was always looking at the other kids who may have been able to have a large closet of clothing. And I always looked at how cool their clothes were, and I thought, "Oh, man, I wish I could have something like that." So yeah, I totally get it that, that could leave a mark that was running with you throughout your rest of your school days.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah, it was not good. And actually the culture shock was so I was the oldest kid. There were 3 of us. The culture shock was so disturbing for me and I was so confused that entire year of school that they held me back and made me do 4th grade again. I just could not adjust. I was too now the backstory behind that is when we were in Pakistan, my dad was walking me to school and we were on the school grounds and he said to me, "Do you wanna go to kindergarten or 1st grade?" And kindergarten sounded horrible because it was this long, weird word, and I didn't even understand what it meant. And 1st grade sounded like you were winning something, and I'm like, "I'm number 1. I'm gonna go to 1st grade." So I never did kindergarten.
Oh,
So, yeah, went right into 1st grade. So when I came back to the States, I was younger than everybody, and so my
mm,
parents were just like, "She's just not mature enough. She has to do 4th grade again." So that's what happened, which again also did not help my social cachet. All the kids
right?
were like, "Why are you still in 4th grade?" When the next school year started. So, yeah, it was not good, not good. So, yeah.
That's difficult, especially for just your own understanding of what's happening, right?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
why am I having to do this? It doesn't make any sense. Everything was fine up until we came back here. Yeah, I can imagine that was very, very confusing. Was your mom a stay-at-home mom, or did she do some work as well?
She was stay at home. She was a
Okay.
stay at home mom. But, not long after we came back from I mean, I wouldn't say not long, but within a year or 2 of coming back to the States, my parents started the process of getting a divorce. So,
Uh,
after that, my mother was my father's job, of course, he went from years going overseas to then traveling for 3 months, and so he wasn't around a
okay.
lot because he was overseas all the time, and I think my mom was like, "I'm just a single mother already. I'm just going to this isn't working." And so they got a divorce. My dad happened to buy a place in the same town, so that was great. But yeah, it was, and that threw the family in turmoil because we lived with my mom during the school year and my dad during the summer. And
Mm,
I tell everybody now, I can pack for any length of a trip anytime in 15 minutes because every other weekend we had to go to the other person's house.
yeah.
So I was packing. My entire life was spent packing. I don't understand people that need, like, 2 days to pack for a trip. I'm like, "What is wrong with you? Do you have
Yeah.
what's happening here?" So yeah, and that the whole thing of coming back to the States, not understanding the culture, you know, I remember being in elementary school and getting beaten up by this other girl who hated my guts, and I didn't understand why. We eventually became best friends, but it was just a whole arena that I did not understand. And so when I got to junior high, I ended up just staying in the library and reading books, and that's all I did. So then in 8th grade, the guidance counselor had let's call it an intervention with me And they called me out of chemistry class, and I remember walking into the guidance counselor's office, and there were both of my parents sitting in there, and I think, "Did someone die?" Because they hate each other, they're never gonna be in the same room together, and the guidance counselor basically said, "We're bringing you in here because you are not developing socially," which, hello, that was my point. I didn't want to. I like the library, it's quiet, no one talks to me. And the guidance counselor said, "We're just worried about you, so we're gonna ban you from the library." So I was banned from the
Oh,
library in 8th
no.
grade. But I mean,
Wow.
yes, so in 7th grade, I had won the reading competition, and I was on the front page of the paper of my hometown. I read, I think, 94 books that year because you'd have to read a book and take a test. The
Yes.
second year, despite them banning me from the library, I won first place again, and I think I read 120 books. So,
Holy cow.
yeah,
That's
that's
so
yeah, they forced me out.
that's so bizarre. Like, why would you stop a kid who had just won an award the year before for reading all of these books, and now you're saying she can't go to the library because you think she's not being social? That
Yeah,
makes
I don't know. I've talked to my parents. My dad has actually apologized to me and said we should have never banned you from the library. But, when I graduated from 8th grade, I mean, I see it absolutely as what needed to happen because when I graduated from 8th grade, I was voted class bookworm, of course, right? Because
okay.
everyone knew.
Yeah.
And then when I graduated from high school, because they forced me to talk to other people, I graduated as class clown. So it allowed me to find this whole other part of myself that was actually really funny and could
Yeah.
talk to people and riff and be ridiculous and silly, and people really liked it. So yeah, I was pretty proud of myself at like the total personality change that happened in 4 years.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite a bit of contrast there. Quite a bit of contrast.
Yeah, and you know what? To be honest, Rich, I have to tell you that all that reading was so important for me for just even writing later in my life. Any sort of writing, everyone always says just read a lot of books. I mean, like always keep reading because you'll learn something. At least at some point, you'll learn something. And I think hiding in the library was one of the best things I could have done just for learning how to write or how to structure a sentence or how to do anything
Right.
with any character. So yeah.
So when once you had this issue with a friend that beat you up and then you later became best friends, was there a discussion after that beating that took place of, "Hey, why did you do that?" Or what was the reasoning behind that at a certain point?
Um, so let's see. It started in 5th grade because, the first year I was with other students, then I was in 4th grade and we didn't know each other. Then in 5th grade, and she was kind of a neighbor. She lived about 5 blocks away from me. Um,
Okay.
and yeah, I don't know what it was. I do not know what it was, except I found out later that her home life was really bad. Her mother was an alcoholic, mostly maintaining,
Mhm.
had like 3 or 4 husbands. It just wasn't a healthy, happy place for her, and
Right.
I think I was new, and I think she was like, "I'm just gonna find someone to take my rage and confusion out on."
Yeah.
I mean, I remember distinctly walking home from the grade school, which was not I mean, where I went to school, it wasn't far, and we were still relatively, like, I still didn't know a lot of the neighbors, we sort of knew them and the neighborhood kids, and she was chasing after me. I was, like, half a block from my house, trying to just take me down, and I thought to myself, "This is the day. This is the day that she just obliterates me," because I'm not a fighter. I don't like to fight. I was just so confused as to why it was happening.
Yeah.
And you know what? One of the neighbor boys who is like 3 years older than us, I think he was either in junior I think he was in junior high at the point. He rode up on his bicycle like Lancelot or something and was like, "Leave her alone." And he's like, "I will, kick your ass
Yeah.
to get you to leave." And she never bothered me again after that. His name was Steve. So, yeah,
Steve,
thanks,
shout
Steve.
out Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, for sure. Shout out Steve,
Yes.
the man riding in on his chariot
Yeah, but I think
to
these things happen to us as kids, and I don't know if you ever had anything like this, but I never told my parents about any of it because I just was like, that is too messy, and I just
Right.
don't want to bother them. Which I think is weird, but I also sort of understand it looking back too.
Yeah, I had an incident like that in 3rd grade. Um, I had a kid in my class, and I'd known him prior to being in 3rd grade with him. Can't remember how that worked out, but it just ended up we were in 3rd grade together. And, we were standing in front of the chalkboard doing some kinda lesson on the chalkboard, and, he was picking on me, and ultimately, I just turned and yelled at him. I'm like, "Stop it." And it ticked him off so bad, he just grabbed me by the side of my head and slammed me into the chalkboard. And I started crying and all that kinda stuff, but I never told my parents about it. It was like, "No, I can't say anything about that."
Yeah, kids can be
Um,
awful.
yeah, for sure,
Seriously.
for sure. Your grandparents, during the time of coming back to the States and knowing that you're gonna be here for a while, did you have much interaction with them on either side of the family?
My dad's mother and father, they divorced and were both remarried. And
Okay.
so
You got
let's
multiple
just say that
grandparents.
like my they lived in Minneapolis, my dad's father and stepmother. So invariably in the summer, my dad would pile us into the car. His car, a Ford Granada, which we call the Grenade, and it didn't have any air conditioning, and he would drive from Chicago to Minneapolis. I'm not
Oh,
gonna lie, those trips were hellacious and sweaty, but the bonus was he would always stop in Wisconsin Dells. So in the middle of the day, we'd stop at the Dells for a few hours and, tube and jump in the water and go swimming, which was like amazing. That, made up for some of it. Thank goodness. And once we got to my grandpa and step grandmother's, it was very chill. We were there usually for like 4 or 5 days. It was very
okay.
boring. They golfed, which I thought was boring, and we would be just there hanging out. But his mother and my step grandfather lived in Florida. And so we'd see them every once in a while. They were classic retirees.
Yeah.
She actually died quite young of cancer, so we didn't get to see them very often, and he
Mm,
passed away too, not long after. My mother's parents stayed together, and they were in Florida. I swear, this was, like, the time where everybody retired moved to Florida,
yeah, yeah.
and, in Stewart, Florida, and, we'd see them sometimes we'd come back to the States when we were in Pakistan, so we'd come back for, like, a Christmas or a vacation. We didn't see them very often. They would come up sometimes to Illinois, but really, we spent so much time overseas. Nobody came to Pakistan to see us. I mean, come on. That's not gonna happen in any universe. So, we would see our grandparents, mostly I mean, after we came back to the States and settled in the States. And then my mom's mom passed away from cancer as well, relatively young. I think the '70s for me, I think the '70s is young. And so, she passed away. And then her grandfather, my grandfather, I guess, her father, he would come up to Illinois quite often after that. He was one of those guys who believed in I don't know, this is so funny because I don't even know if it's done today, but he always had a new car every year, and he'd be like, "I just you drive it for a year, then you take it back in, and you turn it in, you get a new car." And it was like he traded, but he would just pay not I don't even know. I don't know if he was leasing or buying the cars. It was like this thing, and he was a traveling salesman, but it was more like he was like, "This is like this everyone does this, and this is, like, really smart because then the car won't, like, explode on you or, you have to pay $10,000 to fix something. You just go
Yeah,
turn the car in and get a new car." And I'm like, "That's the crazy" like, I can't even think about doing no one I know does that anymore. I don't know, do you
no,
know anyone who does it?
no,
Yeah.
not anymore. But I do know that that was a thing. I mean, I grew up just outside of Detroit, and my dad was a mechanic, so I understand that perspective because he had to work on those cars a lot, and then every time somebody would get a new one, they would come in to make sure that, before they bought it, that it was alright, so they'd have him check it over. So yeah, I'm familiar with that process of every year you get a new one, you just upgrade,
Yes, it's so weird.
you know?
I was like, "What is anyone thinking at this point?" As a kid, you're like, "I guess something that adults do." Even though my mom's not doing it, I guess my grandpa's doing it, so this is like a thing, I guess. So, yeah, it was always, like, excited to see the new car, and then he'd always have, basically, what are they? The wintergreen lifesavers
Yeah,
in his pocket. He's like he came with candy, and we're like, "We're here for that."
for
Very
sure.
exciting.
So was anybody outside of yourself creative in any forms?
That's a great question. My brother and sister, they have gone the traditional route just because that's what life has offered them. So they're
Okay.
both married with kids. I've never been married. I've never had any children. They both found incredible spouses. It's just like it was divinely guided. Incredible kids, my nieces and nephews are incredible. They both went to business school. My brother is very creative because his job is he almost has my dad's job a little bit. He travels all over the world and he is like the meet and greeter. Everybody loves my brother. He's very smart. He's very down to earth. He's grounded. He's funny as hell. And he's real. He has a lot of integrity. So people really resonate with that. So he's great at the company that he works with. And then my sister is also a business person and has her own business. It's pretty
Mm,
successful. um, I would say, my sister's creative because she created her own company and she's made that work. And that's really an inherently generative and creative process. I mean, it takes a lot of guts and bravery as well to do
for
something
sure.
like that. She's creative in the hustle, I guess you could say, getting clients, retaining clients, putting new products out there, all of that stuff. She's like a coach for CEOs and stuff like that. So again, like I would never do that because I just don't want someone else's failure on my shoulders. So if they fail, I'm like, it's not me. Don't look over here. So
Right.
she's willing to, shoulder some of the blame if things go sideways. I am not. I run in the other direction. So I would say, creative like me, no, no.
Okay.
Although, I did move home a couple years ago and take care of my mom for about 6 months outside of
Mm,
Chicago. And she's in her late 80s and she was laying on the couch with her iPad, which is like her favorite thing. It's like her binky. She just
mm,
has her iPad. So
yeah.
she's like, "Oh my gosh." And day after day she'd be watching fashion shows. And I was like, "What are
What?
you doing?" She's like, "I love fashion. I love fashion." And I thought to myself, I never knew this about you. I mean, when I was a kid, I had a whole notebook full. I mean, I don't know why I was doing this. I was just designing clothes and drawing them. When I lived in Pakistan and when I came back, I just had this whole thing of all these clothes I designed. Never knew my mom was into fashion, like ever. And so when I
Wow.
was back there, I was like, oh my gosh, maybe that's where I get it from. So yeah, that was really interesting.
For sure. Do you remember in Pakistan observing the clothing, the garments, the embroidery that
Oh
goes into
yeah.
play? Was that something that really fascinated you?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I should, tell you that it was so, so hot there. It was so hot that for an hour each day, they would for every single grade, the kids got in the pool for an hour. The school came with a pool because 'cause they're like,
Oh,
"These kids will
wow.
melt and they will die." That's how I learned how to swim, with swimming lessons during school in
Very cool.
Pakistan. All that to say, another hour of the day, they split up the boys and the girls. I'm not quite sure what the boys did, but the girls, they taught us macrame.
Okay.
They taught us how to use a
Wow.
loom. And
Nice.
then I was taught how to embroider. So I still have 2 pillowcases that I embroidered with the tiny little round mirrors, and I sold all the beautiful little buttons and other pieces of jewelry on the pillowcases. I still have those pillowcases, they're framed. And I was like,
Very
this was when I was in what, 2nd grade? I'm like, what is happening in this place? But I
yeah.
was better than I thought I was. Yes, I mean, when we went out, it was like a feast for the eyes, whether you were looking at the art or the architecture or the food that you were given. It was like everything was so beautiful and so colorful and so vibrant. And the people were that way too, like
Yeah.
happy and colorful and lots of community and family and care and love for each other. It was really interesting. My mom would take us to the tailor to get clothes made, which is why I had those horrific clothes for the first day of school. And so the tailor would be measuring you and everything. And we never got anything as ornate or gorgeous as like a sari or other beautiful items of clothing that other, adults would wear. Mostly adults would wear those things. But I just remember thinking, I thought the whole world was like that, beautiful and like colorful and like loud and like raucous and like everybody having fun. And yeah, then it's not. I don't know if you know that, but it's not.
Yes, I do know that. That that's why I asked the question because I love fashion as well. Been able to dip my toes in here and there throughout my career. But yeah, that's amazing that you were able to experience that bit of culture from that viewpoint of understanding, number one, how a garment is made through a loom, and it being done and creating the fabric, and then, embroidery, that type of stuff. And I'm assuming it was done by hand, not with a machine.
Oh,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So even that like nowadays in fashion, if you can hand embroider something, oh my gosh, you can make all kinds of money in the fashion industry.
Oh, I
Um,
bet.
especially working with a fashion house that's upscale,
Yeah.
definitely can make money. So being back in elementary school in Illinois and shifting into that eighth grade time frame, and you're told, I can't go back into the library. Was there also another point of tension in terms of stress for you because your parents have dealt with this divorce and you've got your siblings, which I'm assuming you're kind of helping look after as well at that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So what was that like in terms of the way you were starting to think? Was that the reason why you wanted to escape to the library so that you
Oh,
could just
yeah. Oh,
compress?
yes.
Okay.
Yes. I
Yes.
was like, I'm going to go into the library because it's quiet. You
Yeah.
know, I love the quiet. I get overstimulated really easily.
Okay.
So the library was kind of this place to decompress and be left alone, really. Because when I
Yeah.
was in my house, you're not left alone. Two little siblings, they're like trying to annoy the hell out of you every chance they get. And then a mom who's really struggling and trying to figure out how to make ends meet and what to do and all of this stuff. So, yes, absolutely. I was hiding in that library and I fully own it. Um,
Yeah.
getting kicked out and being forced to go to recess because basically the guidance counselor was like, "Hey, so tomorrow," because I would go to the library before school, at lunch, I'd go get my lunch, eat it like in 5 seconds, and then go to the library for like, I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever. And then after school, sometimes I'd be in the library. And so she said, "Yeah, tomorrow for lunch, we've instructed the librarians you're not allowed in and you're going to have to go to recess." And I was like, "What the beep?" It's like, okay, I literally don't understand this. My mom's apologized for it too. She was like, "I don't know what we were thinking." But it was, oh dear, it was the 80s. And I feel like nobody knew what the hell they were doing in that decade. So I remember walking into the outside because it was winter, it was cold. And nobody would play with me. Everybody had their friends. Everybody had been cultivating those friends for like a year and a half. And I just stood there and I didn't know what to do. And then I looked over to the left and there were the three African American girls because my town at the time was very white. So the three African American girls they were friends and they were like, "Come over and hang out with us." And they were my first friends. They let me become part of their group and hang out and have a good time and get to know. And then after that, I started joining things. I was in the plays and I was in other things because I like to in the musicals and stuff. I like to do that kind of stuff. Just the rest of the time, I want to be left alone. so, I got more involved and I made more friends. And yeah, I just, I actually, this is interesting. And I'm just thinking of this now based on your questions. One of the girls who lived like a block and a half away from me, her mother was a teacher, a math teacher at the school at the junior high. And eighth grade year, her mother had been battling cancer for I don't even know how long, years and
Oh,
years.
wow.
And, was really young. I mean, I think was in her 40s. And she passed away that year when I was in eighth grade.
Mm,
And, they had a writing competition or a poetry competition that year. And I wrote about Mrs. Case. I wrote a poem about Mrs. Case. And at the end of the year, they had me read it at the school conference, and then they put it in the yearbook for that year at the beginning. I mean, she'd been at that school for so long, and
yeah,
and I knew her because she was my friend's mother, so I had kind of a closer relationship,
yeah,
with her because they were neighbors, and, I couldn't even at that age comprehend losing my mother. That wasn't even like something that I could even so I felt I had this deep sorrow for my friend who lost her
mhm,
mother and that poem kind of came out I think out of my grief and my sorrow for her. It was
yeah,
like near the end of my 8th grade year. But again, all that reading it kind of helped me to channel the poem.
right.
So yeah, it was I don't know, junior high was interesting in the 80s. That's all I have to say.
Oh, most definitely it was. But what a wonderful, memorial, to be able to do something like that, and to have that conscious thought and interest to do that for her mother, the teacher, and then also too for her as well, I would imagine, to have somebody do something like that's meaningful. That's,
Yeah.
amazing. It's amazing. With this newfound crew who don't look like the rest of the school, but are probably somewhat similar to what you experienced earlier on in Pakistan because it was multicultural. Was it super easy for you to just jump right in with them and start clicking and communicating and doing things?
Yeah, it was interesting. I, have my own podcast and I had this amazingly eloquent and wise and brilliant and beautiful African American one from Oakland on as a guest. And, I told her this story of being banned from the library and then the young girls, in the gym taking pity on me. And she said, "Oh, well, because you grew up," and I'd never thought of it this way before. She said, "Because you grew up in a multicultural landscape as a child," she
Yeah,
said, "you already had intimacy with people of different colors and
yes.
races and religions. Yeah, no wonder, you're looking around, you're like, why can't everybody just get along? It's not difficult.
Yeah,
Not difficult." Yeah, with them, I mean, I just remember it was the season of Madonna. Okay. We're just going to put that out there. And, I mean, I feel like her season's been like 40 years or something like Um, but, I just remember Like a Prayer was out or, just all of her songs.
yeah,
And in the gym, invariably there'd be a group of girls singing one of her songs or playing hopscotch in the gym or doing other things or whatever. And so, if you knew those songs and you knew Madonna, you were cool. Now, my mother never, ever got cable, never. So we were really limited. I watched a lot of PBS. It was
yeah,
really depressing, but also fun at the same time. But when I would go to friends' houses, MTV was invented and it was like the thing to like
right.
watch music videos. We
Yep,
could not believe what we were watching. So if you knew about, I don't know, anything from, the Scorpions to Madonna to Bruce Spring, anything like that, you were cool. And so
yeah,
I learned, besides for the three girls that I was friends with, obviously they knew lots of people and they would say hi and people would come over, kids would come over. I learned that being like conversant and like aware of the music that was going on was really important.
okay.
Because, of course, like this was a time before computers, before cell phones, all of this. And so you literally were limited to what you could get on your TV for
Yes,
anything. or a weird old set of Encyclopedia Britannica, which were probably out of date. So, to become popular, I knew nobody wanted to listen to facts from the Encyclopedia. I needed to know the latest songs and
Ah,
like what was
yeah.
going on. The learning curve was steep. It was steep. But
Mhm.
once I understood, I looked at everybody and I was like, what do I need to do to survive?
Yeah.
It was like, okay, they all really care about these certain things. And music and what was going on was like very important. So I just kind of learned to speak their language. If that makes any sense.
Absolutely.
But it was purely just to survive,
Yeah.
because inside I was terrified of everyone. So yeah.
Yeah. It's fascinating to me that you got to experience that culture so early on. And the reason I say that is because when I was putting together your intro, I read that little bit of information about you talking about being over there and going to school early on and it being just a cultural span of multi races. And I was thinking back about my own experience as a kid going to elementary school. And elementary school that I went to, we had quite a few different races that were across the board. We had Mexican, we had a couple of Asian, we had blacks. We even had some people with disability that were in our classes. So it was just like we all had to get together just because we were all in the same class. So it wasn't like it was obscure or different or there was all these points of contention potentially. It was all like, yeah, we're all together. This is just the way it is. Even with the kids that were disabled that were in our class, everybody just kind of helped out. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? If that person needed something or they had to do something or they had to move or they dropped a pencil, wherever, somebody would just get up, pick it up off, put it up on their desk. And I think that's a thing that so many young kids nowadays, they don't get to experience that feeling of it being normal because there's so much noise outside of those spaces. And a lot of times they're hearing it from their parents as well of how it's not normal. But I think it was very fascinating when I was reading that because I was just like, yeah, I remember that too. It just seemed like everything was the way it should be. It didn't seem like it was us against them or this big divide of cultural landscape that was in play. Like all of those kids too, they kind of lived all around me as well within a few blocks. So it wasn't like I would go back home and then it would be just whitewashed or anything like that. Everybody was all around. So it amazes me now how much divisiveness is out there in the world and how much there's such a push to try and separate, move things apart. And to your point about the music, in the 80s, like that's the thing that brought everybody together. If you knew who was hot and what was going on in the song that was hot at that point in time, like everybody was cool. Everybody thought that was great because it was something that you liked, that I liked. So because we both liked it, that's our connection point,
Yeah.
right? Those are the things about creativity that I feel are somewhat lost in this day and age with phones, computers, all that kind of stuff. Like that connection of being together and creating or vibing over something that's creative. I think that it's a lot harder to do because it's easier to just type, right?
Yeah.
It's easier to just type and talk versus actually speaking one on one type things. So that was a very fascinating thing that I found as I was putting together the intro and correlating that with my own experience growing up in an elementary school as well. And it didn't differ much throughout the rest of my schooling, maybe just a little bit towards high school because my parents put me into a private Christian school. And so there wasn't a whole lot of diversity from that standpoint. And also too, it was so strict. It was, it blew my mind because I had gone to public school up through third grade. And then I just remembered this the other day. In third grade, for half of the day, I went to the fourth grade class just because of my creativity. Like they would have me go over there just to see if there was other opportunities for me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was just it just popped into my head the other day, and it was like, "Oh, wow, I forgot all about that." It was wild. As you're making these new friends and you're about to shift into high school, which is going to change dramatically in terms of a dynamic again, how did that potential anxiety still play in as you're going into ninth grade, 10th grade era?
Yeah, I have to say that there was only one junior high in my city. So, like, the people you went to junior high with were gonna be the same people you went to high school with.
Oh, cool. All right.
And so there wasn't kind of this new giant influx of, like, new people, and you're like, "Oh, we have to figure out the hierarchy all over again," or what have you. I think I was more nervous about being a freshman and a sophomore with all the juniors and seniors who were kids that I'd never been in school with because they were
Right.
literally, like, so far above me. I remember being intimidated by just their age, and I thought they were so wise, and then when I got to be a senior, I'm like, "I know nothing. I don't know what I was thinking about when I was a freshman. What's wrong with me?" But, to be honest, I have to say that being in that school, my dad was still traveling a lot for his job. My mom was at home, and a lot of times she found a job where she was working nights. So she would work all night. We'd have a babysitter, and then she'd sleep during the day. And at this time, my younger brother and sister, everybody's in soccer, they're in all these things. My mom's trying to make sure that we have a good life, but she's trying to sleep and take care of herself. It was a bit of a rocky road at home. It was very, very stressful to be at home, actually. There was a lot of unhappiness there just in general. And so I loved being in that high school. And I've thought of it since. And, schools have a particular smell. They smell like books and they smell like the floor wax that they use to clean the floors. And there was something for me, after being kicked out of the library that was just intrinsically, it felt very safe to be at school because I knew what to expect. There wasn't going to be any sort of like crazy thing popping out of the shadows or someone freaking out or being weird or wild. School for me ended up being, a really safe space. And I was in choir. I was never a soloist, but I ended up being in the musicals in the fall, which I loved. I mean, I love being in the chorus. I'm not someone who likes being out front and being like a star. I love being in the chorus and losing myself in that fantasy world of creativity of, they rent all these costumes. And so you get to wear a costume and they do like 3 or 4 nights of performances. And over the course of the months of the training and trying to figure out how you're supposed to dance, you created a family. And so it was always really, I don't know, I hated when it was like the last night of the play and it was over because I had this deep sense of losing my family, and then I was in swing choir as well. I was in this group, all girls group called Treble Airs, which was fun. I am like a bull in a china shop. Okay. I am not graceful. I'm not the best dancer at all. But finally the Mr. Betcher, the choir master, they had a very, very popular group called Swing Singers that was co-ed, and they would travel everywhere to perform and compete. Finally, senior year, he allowed me to join. And, the other 3 years, I did sound for them. Okay. I ran the soundboard. So I was
Yeah.
like cool by association.
Right.
But then it was another way at night. They would go perform somewhere, so I would go and I'd have all the sound equipment, and so I was part of the Swing Singers without really being part of them. And because of that, I hung out with a lot of seniors and juniors and older people, so they became less scary to me over time. But yeah, I mean, I have to say that for me, the anxiety became less as school became more and more of a safe place for me to be away from the distraction and like tension in my house, in my household.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. With that, did your mom date again after your dad? Or was she
Yeah.
just too
Yeah.
busy with work?
Well, I mean, she was busy. She was working. She oh my god. And this is wild to me to think of this, okay? I don't even know how people found each other back then.
Oof.
I'm like, I guess it was in classified. I'm like,
Oh,
dear God, how did people? Because we have Hinge now and Tinder and all these, and I'm like, how did people meet back then? I guess they met at church or maybe at a school social. I mean, it was really like you're not going to go into Chicago and like meet someone there. You like are in your community, and someone knows someone who knows someone, and is like, hey, you two would be a good match. Um, yeah, sometimes I think about the technological revolution that's happened and I'm like, how did we survive before? Because literally, it's so bizarre.
out of necessity.
Right. She actually dated a few men, but she didn't bring them home ever. There was only once that I remember meeting a long-term partner. But then one day at a class reunion that she organized, she was like the secretary for this. This gentleman who went to the Catholic Military Academy for high school was in town. And so his friend who went to the high school said, hey, come to the reunion because you're going to know a lot of people because you grew up in Batavia. And so Tim came and he met my mom and he was like, oh, do you remember we went on that hayride in high school together? There was like this one night hayride date and it didn't lead to anything. I don't know what happened. I don't know if she ignored him or he ignored whatever. It just didn't work. But here we are, how many decades later? 30, 40 years and 35 years maybe. And they encounter each other at this reunion. And it was like from there, they were together. He lived in Baltimore. He ended up moving back to Batavia and they lived together until he passed away a couple years ago. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, it was just one of those weird Hallmark movies, but like for people who are seniors. Like they don't make Hallmark does not make those movies of like
Right.
people meeting at the class reunion. But yeah, and then my dad, he actually met a woman who is Japanese Hawaiian at a
Okay.
work function and they ended up, she was in Hawaii and then she moved to Chicago and they ended up writing letters because that's what you did back
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
And then she moved to Chicago to work, and gosh, they were together for about 10 years, and then they got married, and they've been together ever since. So yeah,
Wow.
they both found good second life partners.
Good for them. Good
Yeah.
for them. As you're stepping into this opportunity to work the soundboard versus being potentially the center of attention up on the stage, did you find the dynamic of that experience a little bit more comfortable for you and having that control over certain things?
Oh yeah, are you kidding? Also, it was like another way to hide. So I have
Right.
to tell you that I don't know. I I was really nervous and scared of older boys. Like I just
Okay.
was, as any girl my age was. You talk about a senior and I'd be like, "Oh my, I do declare I cannot talk to them. I don't even know what's going on." It was actually quite interesting because the swing choir for a while, well, I mean, every time I actually traveled with a live band. So the band literally played the music that the swing choir performed to. So
Yeah.
all the guys in the band, guitarists, bassists, drummers, all of them are all older. They're all like juniors and seniors. So here's me, little like, second semester freshman, then sophomore, with all these guys where I'm like, he's so cute. So cute. Will he talk to me? And I kind of became their little rug which I loved because they had girlfriends and everything. I was just there's the sound girl and there's a little rugrat over there running the sound. And it really helped me to become less afraid of them, but also to feel accepted and like I made friends. And again, swing choir, another family, right? You're together the whole year with the band and you create a family over and over again for all these events that you go to where they performed. So yeah, it actually was really good for me because, I felt accepted, I felt seen,
Yeah.
and it just felt amazing to belong, even though I felt really awkward and strange because I was a teenager, and a nerd. It was kind of cool to be accepted because, quite honestly, the people in the swing choir and the band were some of the cool kids. I mean, we had the whole
Right.
football action thing going on, of course, but they were
Yeah.
actually some of the most popular kids in the school. So it was like, oh my gosh, I feel cool too.
For sure. For sure. And also too, being in that position of running sound, like that's kind of a key thing for all of them, right? If
Yes.
they can't hear what they're playing, or it's not loud enough, or it's too loud, like that's something that they have to rely on you for, essentially, to be able to make sure that everything is correct and coming through the system the way it's supposed to. So I could see how they would want to at least be somewhat comfortable with you and make sure that you knew that you were a part of everything, because you could literally mess up the entire thing
Oh yeah.
if it had crossed your mind and you had a grudge against somebody. But that's cool. I think that was an outlet for you, from my perspective, an outlet for you to be able to gain that recognition, as you're saying, as well as fall back into something that's kind of contained, that you
Yeah.
can control what's taking place, what's going on, how much outside stuff that you're absorbing or feeling, yet also be a part of those older kids community as well. I think that's
Yeah.
very cool. Did you find early on as a kid that you were highly sensitive to a lot of things, maybe that other people may not have had perceptions of?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think, partially that was because, first of all, I grew up in a Muslim country and I was white and I knew I was different from everybody else that was
Yeah.
out on the street. And, we were American. And yeah, of course, off and on, Americans have not been looked on positively in
Oh,
other countries, let alone a Muslim country. So we had
right.
a big, giant concrete wall around our house. We had a gatekeeper who stayed at the gate and let people in or didn't let people in. There was that sense of just needing to be safe in a Muslim country. But then in my mother started having some terrible health issues in Pakistan where she got, this is crazy. She went from like, I don't know, 130 pounds down to 90 pounds. And the
Oh, wow.
doctor over there who had trained at Stanford, so he knew what he was like, "I don't know what's going on." So they flew her from Pakistan to the Mayo Clinic in Minneapolis.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, here I am in a foreign country with my father gone all day at work. We have an ayah, otherwise known as a nanny or a babysitter who watches us, and my mother
Okay.
is just profoundly ill, like ill. And they thought she had a tropical disease that she'd gotten from South America. It ended
Mm.
up that she had celiac. She had an allergy to gluten.
Oh, wow.
And this, of course, was before anybody even knew that existed. Um, yeah, it was, and as you can imagine, being ill for that long and being that ill mentally was not good for her. So there was a lot of upset and depression and sadness and sorrow and grief in the household. It was pretty intense as a kid. And so I just learned to always have my spidey senses opened up on high so that I wouldn't like upset her or upset my dad. My brother and sister were so little and they were crying a lot because they didn't understand what was going on. So it was just like a house where I learned to always be 100% open so that I could not only for myself, manage to head off whatever tantrum or whatever is going to happen, but so that I could keep myself safe, like mentally safe, which I think is why I love the library. Because at the library, nobody bothered me like that. So it was by necessity. Like I had to at a very young age, become hyper aware of the world that I was living in because for me as a kid, it didn't feel safe. And,
Yeah.
I use that as like a superpower as I navigate my life even today. I mean, it can be, it's, I think my therapist would call it complex PTSD, but
Okay.
it's part of what I have is hypervigilance because I've
Yeah.
just had to have hypervigilance ever since I was a kid. Does that make any
Right.
sense?
No, it makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That I was the same way, but it wasn't necessarily out of having a sick parent or anything like that. I was just always super observant. It may have been too during that time, you're always told, don't go too far. Somebody might grab you up, take you away, all that kind of stuff. So you hear those types of things that make you like, okay, what's going on? I got to know where everything's at all the time, who's around me, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think a lot of us during those early years may have become hyper vigilant just out of that component of I already sense too much and feel too much already. So I need to be extra aware so that I can kind of manage what's going on when possible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes. We learn to adapt.
for sure. For sure. Fortunately, our creative minds allow us to do that a lot
Yes.
better
Yes.
than others a lot of times. As you're shifting into junior year, senior year of high school, are you starting to slip into a space of comfort at all at that point? Or is it still the feeling anxious, wanting to head to the library, wanting to be unseen versus being seen kind of a thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely, I've always had a deep sense of time passing too quickly. So I knew that high school was going to be over before I wanted it to be. I
Interesting.
had such a great group of friends. I just enjoyed myself so much. I felt so safe at high school. I loved the musical. I loved doing the soundboard. I loved being in swing choir. There was so much about high school that was truly enchanting. And the group of friends was like 30 people. So it was a huge group of friends. It was very creative. We always won the best dressed hall during Spirit Week because one of the guys who was in our class and our friend group was this impeccable illustrator. And he actually, as a turdy teenager, they wanted him to illustrate. They had their first manuals for computers for the
Okay.
entire district, and they asked him to illustrate the front cover. So he
Oh,
drew
wow.
a picture of a computer and then put some, I guess you could say, letters or bytes. It looked like weird lettering or some sort of glyph or something on the,
Yeah.
computer lingo. And they found out that when you held it up to the mirror, it said, "Eat me." So, he got into trouble for that.
Little play off of the Beastie Boys album at
Yes.
that.
Um, I was just surrounded by creativity. I was surrounded by, of course, there were dramas and trials and tribulations of high school, but I was really surrounded by this incredible group of friends. It allowed me to blossom and just find out how funny I am. I narrowly missed when I graduated. This should tell you a little bit about my humor. When I graduated from high school, I narrowly missed winning most crude. My humor tended to be a little base. So, lowest hanging fruit. I'm not saying that my comedy was all that. It was sometimes very basic. But yeah, I felt safe in high school. I did not want it to end. It was a time of my life that was, of course, filled with drama, but also an incredible, incredible opportunity for me. So yeah.
Yeah. As you got older and in that space too, did looking out for your siblings become a little bit less stressful?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
because first of all, they were like, "Don't talk to me." Once you get into high school and your little sister's in high school with you, she's like, "You're a nerd and I don't even you don't know me. We don't know each other, okay? So go away." Because my sister was actually, interestingly enough, she was a cheerleader. She
Oh,
was
wow.
like the popular set, whereas I was not that. So
Okay.
in this case, she was like, "Don't talk to me, okay?" I mean, we still love each other and all of that, but high school's a weird place, as I'm sure you know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is. It is definitely. It's so confusing for many. That's fantastic though that you had that experience where you were really comfortable and enjoying it. As you're getting into your senior year, getting towards that end, realizing this is about to stop, are you thinking about what's going to happen afterwards? Are you starting to look for colleges, or are you thinking I may want to just go into and do work? What is your mindset there?
Oh, yeah. Well, you know what? The whole thing was always go to college. And so there
Okay.
was no, I said to my mom the other day, I'm like, it's so amazing, these gap year things. I mean, we couldn't even imagine doing a gap year in the 80s. It was like, you're on task, you go to high school, then you go to college. What is a gap year? That sounds like something from the future.
Yeah.
It is. No, I looked at 5 or 6 colleges. I applied to 5 or 6 colleges. I ended up staying in state. I went to University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. I already knew when I was, that last year of senior year that I was going to Champaign. I just already knew. So it was like my future was already written. I'd graduate, have my summer, lifeguard for the summer at the local quarry, and then go off to school. And I think that last senior year was so bittersweet because I could feel the threads of fate pulling me to something else, but there were so many threads in my hometown that I didn't want to leave. And I think it
Yeah.
illustrated to me again just how quickly time flies and how much I hate that. And how could I even believe that I was even graduating already? Yeah, it's hard to think about because I still miss high school because of my friends. And you
Yeah.
don't have to pay the bills. Sure, you had to get up early every morning to go to school, but you didn't have to show up for a job and you didn't have to pay any bills and someone else paid your rent. It was amazing. Yeah, I look back fondly on those days still.
I get it. I get it. You glossed over something real fast that I want to touch on,
Sure.
because it's very different. You said you were going to lifeguard at a quarry.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Okay.
How how did that even how was that even a thing?
Okay, so my hometown is built on a massive bed of limestone, and
Okay.
so when the town was being built in the 1800s, they quarried a crap ton of limestone out of this massive pit in the middle of the town, and they hit a spring, and the spring was a gusha, and it
Wow.
filled the entire basin where they were mining, so they couldn't mine anymore. So then the townspeople just decided, well, this is a great pool. So over the decades, it just became the quarry, the Batavia quarry. And by the time, I was there and going to the quarry, as a little rug rat, I was affectionately known because my dad, by the time my parents divorced, my dad lived up above the quarry on the main road. And so every day during the summer, we'd all get in our swimsuits, my brother, sister, and I. We'd go out the back door. We'd walk across the cemetery to the back of the cemetery. We'd climb over the limestone wall of the cemetery, which would deposit us in the woods. We'd walk through the woods for a bit, and then we'd hit this old, overgrown road that had been forgotten. That was the old road for Model Ts to go down to the quarry in like 1910, 1920, but it had been taken over by the woods. So we would follow the road where the derpy cars used to drive down, finally coming out of the woods right to the quarry, and we'd swim all day, every day. So we became kids who did that were called quarry rats. I was a quarry rat.
Right.
And, so you get to know the lifeguards who, of course, are in high school, and you're like, oh my God, high
Right.
schoolers talking to me. And so I thought, I want to be a lifeguard someday. Now, thankfully, since I'd been being trained how to swim since Pakistan, I was a pretty good swimmer. Um, my freshman into sophomore year, I trained and became a lifeguard at the quarry. Now, on our busiest day, just so you have an idea, we had a baby pool, a medium sized pool, and a deep end. The deep end had 3 rafts. You couldn't lifeguard in the deep end unless you could dive off the 22-foot tower that
Oh
was
my.
the place where the lifeguard had to be. And one summer, we had over 2,500 people in that pool. It was so massive. You have no idea.
Actually, I do a little bit. And the reason I say that is and the reason I caught it
Yeah.
is because as a kid, when we would go to Tennessee, because both sides of my family are from East Tennessee, my grandma Wright lived next to a quarry,
Okay.
limestone quarry, and there was multiple in the area that she was at. So we would walk down the holler and go off into the woods over to the quarries, and my cousins would all be jumping in and all that kind of stuff. And they would always say that it was bottomless, like it didn't have a bottom. So I was like, "There's no way I'm jumping in that. Doesn't have a bottom. I can't really swim anyways, so I don't wanna,
Oh my God.
dive in and die." And then they would tell stories about people that jump in and they would hit the rocks and get injured and paralyzed, and it was just I was always scared of going over there. So I found it very fascinating that you're like, "Yeah, I was gonna lifeguard at the court." I'm like, "What?" And they literally opened it up to the public?
Yeah, the park district came in, like, they had changing rooms, they had bathrooms, it was all very official, but
Oh,
I'm sure
okay.
as you know, it was the '80s, so it was also wild and woolly, and,
Yeah,
I think our bottom was about it was 30 feet in the deep end,
okay.
and it had, all sorts of aquatic plants growing up from the bottom. I mean, it was pretty rough. It's very different now. It's super sterile. It's way smaller. They got rid of a lot of things because, quote unquote, progress. That's why I'm glad I grew up in the '80s because there was something
Yeah,
just really raw and real about that place and about the '80s. There was a lot that wasn't good about the '80s, but there was just less pretense, I guess you could say. You kind of just showed up and you put up with oh, it's 30 feet deep and there are going to be these weird plants that feel slimy. Okay, cool. We're just going to deal with it. We're going to have fun with it. So, yeah.
right. Yeah, that's amazing that they recognized the fact that they could do something with it in terms of building it structurally and making it a community thing. The quarries that I was going to were abandoned, so there was nothing around them
Oh,
except
mm,
except the water.
God. Is that where you learned how to swim?
I did not. Honestly, I don't even remember where I learned how to swim, and I can't swim very well now. I did go off to college to Florida, Pensacola, so I was swimming in the ocean and when I was in college, but I don't remember where I learned how to swim at all, honestly. That's the first person that's ever asked me that question.
Oh, really? Oh, well,
Yeah,
I think, I don't know why, but I just think learning how to swim is so important
I
because
do
you,
too.
you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah,
It's like, also like learning, especially how not to panic
right.
when you're swimming and you're in the water and understanding that if you take a very deep breath, you basically become buoyant and will bob
Mm,
around in the water, the dead man's float. If you can do
right.
that, you're set.
Okay, okay, for sure. Audience, words of wisdom there. Words of wisdom. Yeah, I never really maybe it was just because 'cause I'm a Capricorn, it somewhat came naturally,
Okay.
that that bottom half component of Capricorn, because I remember that when I was in high school or college rather, in Florida, I mean, we would go out into the surf, like, every weekend, um, and even one year we had one of the hurricanes came through, and eh, crazy us that went to the beach and were surfing, we went out while that hurricane was coming because we knew the waves were gonna be great. Exactly, exactly, exactly. So, we're out there and we're just, like, swimming in it, catching the waves, swimming in it, catching the waves, and then when it started getting to where the waves were coming in faster, then it was like, "Okay, we better get out now because this is getting they're not as far apart as we're normally used to. The waves are coming in too fast." So, yeah, a little bit stupid at that point in time in relation to death, how fast or easily you could die. being in the ocean.
God.
Yeah, yeah. Boys,
Yeah.
I get
And you made it. You're here. So
true. Very true. And you know what? Being from Michigan too, I mean, we've got lakes all around us. And you understand this being from Illinois. Even from that perspective, that's probably where I learned to swim. Now that I'm thinking of it, is we used to go to the beach when I was real little, and it was on Lake St. Clair.
okay.
So that's probably where I learned, I imagine, was just going to the beach and being in the water that way. Wow. Some memory just popped up for me in this conversation. That's amazing. So once you went off to college, did you already have it in your head what you wanted to study, or were you just going to do the basic stuff to get a feel for being in that environment?
Oh my gosh, once I went off to college, I just became a banana nuts crazy person. I mean, because I grew up with a mother who was very strict.
Okay.
I always had to watch my brother and sister or fret about them or worry about them. And all of a sudden I go to school at Champaign-Urbana that has 60,000 students, and it is just a party
Yeah.
school. Late 80s, early 90s, again, no phones, no computers. If you want to see someone, you literally have to call, see if the phone's not busy. Is the phone busy? Okay, I guess call later. Or
Yeah.
walk over across campus to their place to see if they're home.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I went a little crazy. I got a little crazy in college, and to be honest, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I love to read, so I was like, I'm just going to major in English, and then because I didn't want to leave after 4 years, I stayed an extra semester. I did another major in speech communications. Um, but yeah, I had no idea what I wanted to be at all. When I graduated, I sent out resumes. No one would take me. 100 resumes. Finally, I signed up for a temp agency, and they sent me to Skokie, Illinois, and I ended up working for this. It was like, I don't even know what this company does. It's a private nonprofit grocery co-op. And so it was owned by all these grocery stores all over the US and Canada. And we would do their private label for them. So we do
Okay.
everything from testing the dog food or the toilet paper or whatever. And then as a giant consortium, they would buy all of these, buy a crap ton of toilet paper, put it in a warehouse, and then have their private label put on it. So you could say Hagen or Fred Meyer toilet paper or whatever. So yeah, it took me a few months. I'm like, what does this place do? I have no idea what this place, but I'm here and I'm getting paid, and that's fine. So no, my creativity disappeared. It really disappeared when I was a kid because I had to survive my household, and I had to survive what was going on with my mom and the divorce. And then in college, of course, I went bonkers, and I was like, I have to fit in with everyone else. This is like, I just leveled way up, way up.
Okay.
I don't understand this world. No creativity whatsoever. I worked like 3 jobs and I was in school. I didn't really have much time. I mean, I partied a lot, but I was also trying to pay bills. And then, I worked at the corporation. And then 2 years at that corporation, I was at a celebration of the corporation and the long term people. And so here's a big giant jumbotron saying 5 years, and it would have all the pictures of the 10 years. And I sat there and I was like, I'm going to hurl. This cannot be my life. Because by that time, I was an official employee. They brought me on off of temp status. I was an employee. I looked at that and I was like, nope, I can't breathe. Then they got to 20 years and I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna freak out. I can't do it. So it was like
Yeah.
just a week later that I went to my boss and I was like, but in the interim, I talked to a friend who'd moved to Bellingham, Washington. I was like, I'm going to leave because I get, and I sold everything I owned and I drove with my car in a tiny U-Haul to Bellingham, Washington. I like walked away because I was like, this cannot be my life.
Yeah.
The idea of doing a Monday through Friday and giving up my entire life for a corporation that didn't care about me, that would never care about me, and having my entire spirit stifled like that was,
Right.
I like freaked out. Yeah.
Wow. So what was the draw to go to Washington?
What my best friend who I grew up with, who was African American actually,
Okay.
she was on my soccer team. She said, "Hey, I'm, working for this company in Bellingham and I need a roommate." I mean, I'm just putting it out there and I was like, "Okay." I mean, like literally at the time that I was deciding that I was looking at all the jumbotron and I was like, "Dear God." She's like, "Hey, I need a roommate in Bellingham. Do you know anyone?" I was like, was like, "Get out of my way." So I told my parents, I'm like, "I'm leaving. I'm going." My siblings were like, "You're crazy. What are you doing?" They're like, "What are you going to do out there?" And I'm like, "I don't care. Get out of my way." I was like, ah. The one person who like supported me and was like on my side was my dad. And
Okay.
I think no one was angry with me. I think my brother and sister were like, "Okay, you do you, whatever." My mom was fretting. She's like, "You're gonna get human trafficked or something." And I'm like, "Oh my God, mom, anywhere I go in the world, do you think I'm gonna get human trafficked?" And then my dad was like, "I support you going and having an adventure. Here's some money to help you." And so I got to Bellingham. I was there 3 weeks and she lost her job. And she's
Oh
like,
my God.
she was a computer programmer, so Microsoft snapped her up in 2 seconds. So she
Okay.
had to move. She left Bellingham 3 weeks
Oh,
after I got there.
no.
All of a sudden, I was, like, by myself in this city that I didn't have any idea what it was, what was going on. I ended up working at a bar, and I was in Bellingham for about 2.5 years, and did everything you're supposed to do in your 20s, which is like go crazy, have fun, make weird friends in a bar that you're never going to see again for the rest of your life. Go out. Bellingham at that time in the 90s, the early 90s was so small and so beautiful. It's kind of become very expensive and chic now, but it was small and undeveloped. And after we got off at the bar at like 2 or 2:30 in the morning, we'd go out, walk out on the peninsula and sit right next to the ocean and look at the stars in the forest because the forest goes right down to the water line until like 5 or 6 in the morning. It was just this incredible, strange, funny, weird transition where I had a bunch of different jobs, no creativity. None,
Okay.
because I was like, I mean, I really did I felt lost. I was like, if the corporate 9 to 5 isn't for me, and I know it isn't, because I feel like I'm going to die if I go back to that, then what am I supposed to do out here? And I ended up after 2.5 years, I moved to Portland, Oregon, and, over those years, restaurants, bars, I never really worked a corporate job again because I just knew it would kill my soul. But again, very little creativity. I had tons of ideas, so many ideas, and I never did anything with them because I was exhausted because I was working all the time. I bought a house when I moved to Portland because it was cheaper to buy a house at that time than it was to rent. So all of a sudden I had a mortgage when I was like 29 or 30, which I ended up being a huge gift because I sold it to pay off my master's of divinity in seminary later on. But, 23 years earlier, you don't know. You're like, I'm just buying this house. And then
Right.
I realized later, I was like, oh, I bought the house so I could sell it when the real estate appreciated and pay off my school loan. I mean, that's partially why I bought the house. But to be honest, I'm going to tell you, it was 23 years of no creativity, nothing. It was just, I think I had a lot of trauma from my childhood I was trying to get over. I was trying to survive. I felt lost and confused because here are my brother and sister getting married and having kids, and I'm not doing any of that. But I know I can't do any of it because it'll make me crazy. And it wasn't until I started graduate school and they gave me in seminary, they want to make sure you're in the right program. So they gave me like a 700 question personality test. It took me like
Hmm.
6 hours to fill out. And the guy who was a Presbyterian pastor, but also a psychoanalyst, came back with my results and he was like, "Okay, so you're an artist." And I was like, "What?" And he said, "No, look on this graph, you're an artist. It says right here that is your primary mode of being." And I was like, "My God." Suddenly so many things make sense. And my second way of being is science and technology. And I was like, that makes sense because I've read science magazines since I was a kid and I love them. But this artist piece was completely bonkers for me. But once he gave me that result, I was like, oh my God, that explains all the ideas. That explains all the things I've been wanting to do for decades. I've never
Right.
been able to do them. And it was like he and that test gave me permission to do everything that I've done since then.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I want to, because again, we kind of shifted into this scenario of you being in seminary. And I'm like, wait a second, how did we just jump from the bar to seminary? Like, like where did that time frame go to? How did that
And
come about?
yeah, well, everyone else in my family would like the answer to that too. Um, well, I mean, I've my entire life, lived in the library, loved it. One of my favorite things is my entire life has been collecting and reading folk tales, fairy tales, myths from all over the world because I just think it's fascinating how humans look at their reality, their lives, and then, try to create stories from what they've experienced or seen or what have you. So I've always been a fan of that. So I started dating a gentleman who was Catholic. He still is Catholic. And he had this bookshelf of just books that I was like, oh my God. And so I started reading, stories about the rule of Benedict, the Benedictine order. And I started reading about, gosh, all sorts of saints in the Catholic Church. I started reading writers from the Catholic Church. And then I read this book and I was just thinking about it yesterday. This I started reading books written by modern day pastors and their experiences of being in the church. So I started reading this book called Here If You Need Me. And it's so beautiful. And it's by a woman who's a chaplain in Maine. And she works with the men and women who are called out for the worst of the worst cases, the forestry guys, the ones who go out, the police officers and the first responders who go out. For example, one of the events was an elderly woman called and said, my husband hasn't come back yet from his snowmobile ride. And, they go and they find he tried to go across the lake and his snowmobile went right through the ice.
Oh,
Another example is some parents whose child wandered away in the snow in the winter. And she's there not only for the families, so she shows up for them and
okay.
is there for them in this moment of great just
Despair.
unknowing, right? Because they don't know what's happened to their loved one, but she's also there afterwards for the first responders who are there to they go out and they try to find the loved one who's missing. It rarely ends well because that
Right.
person's gone missing for a reason. It is the most beautiful book. So I was dating this gentleman for 5 years, devouring his bookcase. And he said, he had thought about becoming a Catholic priest, but he decided against it. And then I read this book, Here If You Need Me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what I want to do. That is what I want to do. It was like this clarion call for my spirit. I was like, I have always been the person that people come to and they're like, I need advice. Can I tell you
Oh,
this story? Can I lay one on you? And can you not judge? And like, can you help me? And what have you? And
yeah.
I have always been that person. Sometimes it's been exhausting. But I love being present for people in that way. And I love being a sounding board for them. So reading this book and understanding her job and I thought, oh my gosh, that's what I want to do. And then I was driving around in Chicago when I saw my family and the NPR was on and they had this conversation airing. And this sounds like the start of a joke, but it was a rabbi, a Catholic priest, and it was an Anglican bishop. And they were debating something. And I just got this massive ball of envy in my heart. And I was like, oh, pay attention. You want to be part of those conversations too. But
Oh, wow.
with the accreditation, with the degree, the gentleman I was dating was like, well, you could go to seminary. There's like seminaries all over the place, like all over so I started researching them. And I wanted to go to one that I'm not religious. I don't have a religion. I'm a
Okay.
panentheist. And so I was like, I need to go to one that's, non-denominational. And at my work, so this is how I make my decisions. You have to know. So I found like 4 seminaries that I wanted to go to. At my work, Every new person I met for like 3 or 4 months was from Denver. And I'm like, "This is weird." And I thought to myself, "Okay, well, one of the seminaries I'm applying to is in Denver. Based on what I'm seeing and observing, I'm already gonna get in and I'm going to Denver because that's basically what the universe is telling me." So I didn't apply anywhere else, and I got into the seminary in Denver. So yeah, that's how I ended up going to seminary. It was partially because I wanted to be a part of those deep conversations. I also wanted to help people and be there for them. And it was another way to scratch that itch of learning more about, because I took intro to Islam, I took a class in Buddhism. So it was again learning about all those things, folk tales, fairy tale, the ways humans create meanings, but just in a religious context.
Right. That's fascinating because where I'm immediately going in my headspace is all the way back to you being in Pakistan in school and being exposed to all of those different cultures all in that one environment. Now you're back here in the States and you're listening to this conversation of three different modalities of thought and perspective. And obviously it draws you in, that's fascinating for me because it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Makes complete sense. Once you get into that environment and you're starting to learn all of these different things from these different perspectives and all of that, are you seeing that path to becoming like that lady who wrote the book? Are you seeing that play out, or are you starting to feel into more of this? Oh, I think I want to explore this artistry side.
Yeah, that's such a great question. So you have to know that I am mostly an introvert. And so I like talking to people because people say, "How do you do your podcast if you are an introvert?" And I'm like, "It's different. They're on a screen. It's way easier." But I'm mostly an introvert. And to be a chaplain, you have to be able to walk into a hospital, go into complete strangers' rooms, talk to them, sit with them. And I came to this realization halfway through seminary. I'm not going to do CPE, which is what they call the chaplaincy
Okay.
internship. I was like, I can't do it. I know, like, psychologically I can't do it. And also came to the realization. I was like, I've been caretaking since I was a kid because
Right.
I caretook my mother, I caretook my brother and sister as the
Yeah.
oldest. I'm tired. I am so tired.
Yeah.
I'm so tired. I don't want to take care of anyone else. And I did my internship. I worked with some organizations here in Santa Fe and I graduated, but I graduated right as the pandemic was starting and everything was shutting down. So I'm sure, as you can imagine, there are no jobs anywhere for anyone.
Yeah.
And I was sitting around that summer as everything was shut down, and all that time that I had, there was so much time. And that's when I started the podcast. That's when I started just writing and, downloading my scripts for all of my shows and everything that I've written. It was like this summer of abundance. I actually
Okay.
told someone that it felt like I felt like something was riding me, like the muses were on my shoulders and they were like, "Sit down and do this, or we're gonna make your life horrible." And
Right.
so I felt like compelled, like I didn't have a choice. So, yes, the pandemic was terrible for so many people for a variety of reasons. But for
Right.
me, it really provided a space where a lot of creativity could flow. It was really, really, I got permission in
Yeah.
seminary and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's what I needed, the permission." And it's just been nonstop ever since.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. It's interesting as a creative hearing that perspective of the fact that creative soul inside of you was literally on your shoulders being like, listen to us. We need to express, we need to come out. We need you to shift into this different mindset and allow us to be, allow
Yeah.
us to come forth, which it's interesting because even from the storyline of, being in school and working in this space of doing the theater stuff and then shifting into the chorus component, but then also to shifting into the soundboard component. It's like you've navigated these creative fields in a way in multiple areas of production experience of putting something together. And now you've got this creative soul that's coming up and bubbling up. You've been given permission that somebody's recognizing, hey, you're not supposed to be doing what you're coming here for. This is telling me you're supposed to be doing this other thing, which is this creative thing. And even from a spiritual standpoint, I find it very interesting because you're in this space of what's supposed to be a godly thing, right?
Yeah.
But what's really coming through is this side of being part of the creator,
Yeah.
the ultimate creator. And us as creatives have that gift and that ability to do these things that are akin to the creator. And it's fascinating for me because I went to a private school and all that kind of stuff and understand the fundamental Baptist side of things and perspective from there. I understand how being in that environment can stifle creativity. But what's fascinating is the fact that you were given the permission from that community to be like, no, go out and do this. You don't want to finish this up. This isn't going to be for you. This is what you're supposed to be doing. That was very fascinating to hear that come to fruition. And then, too, the pandemic, everybody's freaking out, but you see it as prime opportunity to just explore, to create, to start writing, to start the podcast, to start talking to people, reconnecting when everybody's disconnected because we've
Yeah.
got to stay shut in, all that kind of stuff. That's very cool. Very cool. When this is taking place and these ideas are coming forth, which thing did you do first? Did you do the podcast first or did you start writing the books first?
I've been thinking about the books for about 10 or 15 years.
Okay.
So they'd been percolating, and I'd be at my job in Portland and wiping tables and bussing dishes and doing all that. And I'd think about it, and it would be like with a sigh. Oh gosh, why don't I do that? Oh gosh, why aren't I doing that? Well, first of all, a lot of the reasons I don't do things is because everything costs money. Or, if you want to get like an illustrator to illustrate your books, you have to pay money. If you want to
Right.
self-publish, you have to have money to self-publish. So when I sold my house in Portland, I paid off seminary, but also I spent some of that money to develop my ideas. So,
Okay.
I paid an illustrator for my animated series, Fiverr.com, everyone. I found a great illustrator in Bosnia who did an incredible job illustrating my animated series. You have to pay for that. I think there would be a lot more creative output, a lot more art in the world if people didn't have to pay for supplies, if people
Yeah.
didn't have to pay to like hire someone to finish the project for them, if people didn't have. So I'm an advocate for we need to make art accessible for people and make it easier for people to put their ideas out in the world. But that's a whole other story. It's a whole
Right.
other story. Initially, that summer, everything shut down kind of February or March in New Mexico. And in seminary, we had a really close cohort of people. And so I was watching what was going on social media for them and then all my friends from college and high school. And everybody was really scared and terrified about what was going on. They were lonely. They're like, I can't deal with this anymore. I'm getting depressed. Like, I can't. And I thought to myself, people always come to me and they tell me these weird stories, like these weird things that have happened to them that are just so bizarre. And they're like, what do you think that is? And so I'm like that person that people gravitate towards. And I thought to myself, I love those stories. I bet other people would love those stories. So, not knowing anything about podcasts, I have no idea what I'm doing. None. The first episode. So, I texted and called people from my cohort. So, my first 10 guests are basically people that I went to school with who are like, we're going to take a chance on you. They're kind and generous and wonderful. The first episode took like 25 hours to produce because I had no idea what I was doing. And you'll hear from episode 1 to where I am now, episode 280, it's changed so much. The production values are so much better. But everything like this long term is a learning process. And you get better and you get
Yeah.
better and you get better. Don't worry. Now I'm down to like 3 hours per episode of production, not including the interview. But I thought I can bring these stories to people that are, maybe it's about a ghost. Someone saw a ghost. Maybe it's about this guy I had on, he died 3 times after a terrible car wreck. And what he saw on the other side. I've had stories of best friendships. Someone said my best friend was like, no, this is who you really are. Own it. Changed her
Right.
life. I've had humans create meaning in so many different ways. And when they do have these experiences where they're like, yeah, so science says this doesn't exist. And here it is. I'm like, am I psychotic right now? Am I having a nervous collapse? Why am I seeing this thing? Why am I experiencing this? Because it literally makes no sense, according to Western science or just science in general. I'm like, I love those stories. So I just started saying, hey, people, I want to hear from people who've experienced something magical or miraculous, however you describe it. I had a guy
Right.
come on and he was Mormon and he's like, when I was 7, I saw an angel out in our pasture and the angel told me things. And so I've gotten every story and people love to hear those stories. They're modern day fairy tales, except they're true because they have
Yeah.
happened to these people. And I've always been interested in the liminal space between what people consider to be real and what other
Mhm.
people consider to be real. And the majority of the world does actually consider spirits and the ancestors and the departed to be very real and that
Oh,
they're
yeah.
with us all the time. The scientific paradigm, thank God, has not taken over the planet. I love science, but there's
Right.
like, in parts of it, there's an utter lack of imagination. And there's also this propensity to say, you know what, you don't fit in our box, the box of science that we already have. So you might need to go see a doctor and get put on some medication. And so I really want to create a safe space for people who've had these really, I guess you could call them out of the box experiences so they can feel heard. But also it's like they want to share the good news. So I talk about it that way. The good news of the Bible, they want to hear the good news. My listeners want to hear the good news that magic is real.
Yes.
Miracles happen. There is good in the world. And so that's really what took off that summer. Everything else, I had to start plod along and write, go back,
Yeah.
rewrite,
Right.
the process.
Very cool. Yes, I agree that people want to hear those things. They want to hear about those things because at that point, it makes them feel like they're not the crazy,
Right.
right? Because maybe they're already understanding that that's possible.
Yeah.
Uh, if I know a perfect example from my perspective is, and I've said this a few times in different episodes, but one of the things that really changed the trajectory of my own personal healing journey was the fact that I was with a psychic friend of mine, and she had mentioned here and there that she had wanted to do a reading for me. But then when I would ask for one, she would be like, no, you're not ready. And so she kept putting me off. And then finally one day I was like, I need you to read for me. And she goes, okay. And as she started, she tapped into my grandfather who passed when I was 11. And this was my mother's father. And when I was growing up, he was a Southern Baptist minister in East Tennessee. On the weekends, he would go to his church, do all of that. And then during the week, he would just work on the farm that they had. So I was raised during the summers with a grandma Wright and then now my grandma and grandpa Gibson on my mom's side. And it was this feeling of being home all the time, which I felt completely different when we come back to Michigan. Down there, felt comfortable, felt like I was home. We would go out and do stuff. I would help him work the farm. We'd bale hay. We would mow the hay, all these different things. Ride to town in the truck. Even if it was just, he just had to pick something up. We just get in the truck, go to town, come back. That was it. But it was like the coolest thing ever. And so she starts telling me about this gentleman that's coming through, is giving her this information. And she starts describing the information that he's giving her. And it's literally this experience that me and my grandfather had that nobody else knew about ever. We didn't tell anybody. It was just him and I. We went to town after we were mowing hay one day and needed to cool off. And we just went and we experienced this whole scenario. And she's describing it to the T. And I'm like, there's no way possible she could even know any of this information. Like, I didn't even tell my parents this happened. So there's no way possible that she would know that this. And plus, he's been passed away since I was 11. And this is 2012 that she's doing this. And I start bawling. I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. Number one, I've been raised that her having this ability was quote unquote witchcraft, right? Because of
Yeah.
being in fundamental Baptist environment, that's witchcraft. You don't mess with it. But as I'm hanging out with her and realizing she's not that weird, like she doesn't seem like a witch. Like all of those stereotypes, like she doesn't fit into that. And so it starts to open up my mind to the possibilities of the fact that, wait a sec, maybe this Evan that everybody's talking about, this place that you have to attain to go to when you die, is a bit different than the way it's been portrayed and the way it's been told to me. And so I started opening up about different things that are possibilities. And not only did he come through, there's another friend of mine that had come through who was horrifically murdered.
Oh,
And I only knew her for a short period of time. And she wanted to let me know that she really felt I was a good man. And that when she was around me, she felt that. And she wanted me to know that. And I'm like, how in the world? Again, nobody knew this person because I didn't know her very long before she was murdered. And then for her to come through, like, what are the odds? And so that allowed me to start looking at things differently from the way I was raised, from the way that I was experiencing stuff in therapy, psychotherapy, cognitive therapy. And I found this psychiatrist named Dr. Brian Weiss. And he's written all of these books about past life experiences and how he's documented them over the years.
wow. Wow.
One of his main books, the first one that I grabbed, was titled Many Lives, Many Masters.
Love that book.
Yes. So it was all about all of his patients, what they'd experienced, all of these kinds of things. And I just devoured every one that he had written because I wanted to know more. I wanted to hear it because I'm in therapy and he's a therapist who's writing about these experiences with his clients. And I'm like, I need to know more, 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 more. And so that allowed me to start moving into this place of realizing that there's more of a spirituality about living and being a creative than what structured religions have tried to formulate and craft and keep people separate. And so that was another fascinating, again, working on your intro of seeing this spirituality and social justice come into the wording of that multidisciplinary creative that you are, I was like, this is going to be an interesting part of the conversation when we tip into this about what's going to come out from that type of experience. As you're starting to realize these things and you're starting to craft these things that have been brewing in your mind for all of these years, how is that component starting to filter in and play into how you're putting stuff together?
One of the things my ex, who had the bookshelf of Catholic
Yeah.
books of all the mystics, he taught me this word called charism. And
Mm,
it is from the Catholic Church. It means gift or blessing. And the idea is that everyone has, if at least one, if not more, charisms,
yeah.
which you would say are the gifts that the gods have bestowed upon you, that it's your job, it's your sacred job, your only job is to live into recognize the charisms you've been given and then live into those charisms or bring those charisms into the world to help
Yeah.
other people. Because literally the only reason each of us is born on this planet is to help other people and to lift them up. And we're going to do it all in different ways. Madonna did it in her way. We can go
Right.
back to
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Flock of seagulls did it in their way. Everybody has. Leonardo da Vinci did it in his way. So it's our job to self-reflect, do some interior work, recognize the gifts that we've been given by the gods, and then think, okay, how can I bring this gift into the world so that it lifts other people up? And so that's where my, social justice component comes in. The first episode of Murder of Two is my response to George Floyd's death, his
Mm,
murder. And because I was just beside myself and I could not believe that had happened. And that episode just came out within 10 minutes. It just like came out and it was like perfect. But I was so angry and upset and distressed and sad and horrified.
yeah.
Inevitably, like I'm rewriting the Peter Rabbit book series, and every single book, it is a play off Peter Rabbit, but it's dealing with what we're engaging with today: destruction of the environment, sweatshops, human trafficking. They are not kids' books. They're not kids' books. They're illustrated, they're beautiful. I've been told by many people that they're beautiful, but the content inside is demented and dark. But that's,
Oh,
again, sort of my sense of humor. I'm
sure.
like, a lot of people would tell you, oh my gosh, Kirsten, her heart is like open. She loves everyone. She's just the most generous and kind person. And that's true. But I also have this like little Emily Dickinson says, tell the truth, but tell it slant. I have this slant in how I write these books that are, I want to arrest the reader. I want them to stop and say, what am I reading? Oh my gosh, what is happening right now? Wait, why is
Right.
there a skinned rabbit on the cover of this book? You're going into a world that is very different than the original Peter Rabbit world. Once I realized that, once the guy was like, hey, you're an artist. And I was like, what? That's not a real thing. How do people make a living from this? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
I really struggled and I was really angry. But then I realized, hey, you know what? You're unique. You're an individual. What does it look like to bring this and live this into the world? And how can you help other people? Like, just use your demented little sense of humor, use your years of reading books, your imagination, something wild and woolly is going to emerge. And
Yeah.
that's basically what happened.
That's fascinating. I could see how it all would play together. And I imagine part of the quote unquote demented side or slant side of it is coming from certain experiences that you may have had where they weren't so fuzzy and they were a bit off or skewed. And from that, because you've been someone who's been the person who other people express to, that has to go somewhere for you.
Yeah.
So for you to process and move that out, it it may have created that component where it's like, I've taken this all in, I've listened, I've heard held space for all of these people. Now I've got to express it, and it doesn't feel as comfortable as maybe the way I need to express it.
Yeah.
And so I've got to spin it this way
Yeah.
so people can see and get a feel for my discomfort through my listening and my hearing and my holding space.
Yeah.
Does that sound
Oh, yeah, and I think another component is, besides for just everything that you just said and recognizing your charisms, I think another good practice is go back to your life, look at your life, think about moments in your life that changed your life, and then see them as the path that you were always meant to take so that you could end up here, so that you could do good things for other people or show up for other people. Me getting kicked out of the library, my parents still apologized. And it was like, are you kidding? If you wouldn't have kicked me out of that library, I would have never found out that I'm funny. I would have never found out about my sense of humor. I would have never been able to even talk to anyone, let alone do a podcast. Okay. I
right?
mean,
Right.
at the time, it was horrifying. But it
Yeah.
was, I directly look at that as God or the universe or spirit saying, all right, this is going to hurt, kid. This is going to hurt, but this is part of your journey. This is your process. This needs to happen. It's going to hurt. So I can look back on those moments and have appreciation and gratitude because I needed to be shaped and formed in that way so that I could live into my charisms later in life. And that's all due to therapy, right? Thank God for a good therapist
Yes.
helping you to like reflect and understand and integrate experiences in our lives. And then also have gratitude for them. There are so many incredible, exceptional, beautiful, generous, kind human beings out there that want to bring beauty into the world, that are striving to bring beauty in the world, collaboration, community, and, I wish more people could recognize the gifts that they have and then
Yeah.
step into them because we need all those gifts. We need them all. We need each and every person and all the weirdness and strangeness and enlightenment. And I need all their demented little ideas so this world can become more beautiful. So, yeah.
For sure. I agree 100%. And the other thing that, as you're talking about needing all of those things from the creative community and for people that are in the creative community, one of the things that I always try to put out there is the pivot, the ability to look at your charisms, your gifts, all of those things, and what you're creating. If it's not sustaining you or fulfilling you, look at pivoting. You can pivot into all kinds of different other creative fields and maybe use your gifts and talents in a way that may be better suited for you, as well as allow you to grow even more so if you just shift into a different industry. And one of the things that was very fascinating for me when I reached out and we connected was the fact that you have all of these titles, and they a lot of times titles don't always come with degrees and everything like that, but it comes from experience that you gain those titles, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that you've taken these different elements from your entire life and you've pivoted into these different genres and things that you're doing, it's just expanding out your creative net, so to speak, and throwing it out there and projecting it out there. Or even from the podcast perspective, the microphone, the sound bites that are going out, those stories that are going out, those conversations, all of that. I think if creatives can look at life and their particular careers from a perspective of it doesn't just have to be one thing.
Yeah.
It can be many. It can be more than one. I think then will we start to have more of a colorful world
Oh, yeah.
because of all of that, right?
Yeah.
And from all of the different perspectives and experiences that we have with each other or singularly, just your perspective of growing up in Pakistan early on and going to school with what would visually seem like a United Nations setting, right?
Yeah.
Just that perspective alone and that initial interest in seeing the clothing, the culture, later on realizing your mother loved fashion, and then
Yeah.
how that clicked for you and connected back, right? All of those things are just color that just comes into play in the fabric of your life. And I think that is the beauty for me of being able to have this type of conversation.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
then for the creative community to be able to hear it and listen to it. Obviously, I'm going in a route that's probably not the most palatable for many because it's long form.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But if I don't do it, then these things don't come out
Right.
because not enough time for it to allow the conversation to navigate in the way that it does
Oh,
throughout
yeah.
however much time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I absolutely enjoyed every bit of this conversation and learning about your story, your life, your journey. It was truly a blessing for me, a
Me
bite-sized blessing.
I mean, me too, because I can't believe 2 hours gone by. And, what?
Yeah, that's exactly. That's the thing. That's once the guest realize where the time is, they're like, "Wait, what just happened?" Because they don't and I think that's the beauty of it as well, from that scientific, spiritual side of things.
Yeah.
Like, if you start to not focus on time, then it just disappears,
Yeah.
and I think that is if I'm not mistaken, I believe Nikola Tesla delved into that field a little bit of time and space
Yeah.
and the relationship of that. So again, it plays into many things. And I truly appreciated this conversation with you, Kristen.
Oh my gosh, me too. This has been so much fun.
Cool. Very cool. As we're closing out, do you have anything that you want to highlight for the creative community to maybe just give them a little extra boost or nudge moving forward in their
Yeah.
lives?
Yeah, I think an ex-partner of mine said to me very wisely, "You were never allowed to have a childhood because you were working since you were little." And
Mm,
so, and he knew me when I was in seminary. He's like, and post-seminary, and he said, "Now you get to be a kid. You get to be a kid." And so part of what I'm channeling with the podcast and the writing and all of it, anything creative is it's like the childhood I never had. And by that, I mean, there's a sense of whimsy and delight and play. And most of all, everything has to be fun with like a capital F for me, or I won't do it. And then in addition, I don't take myself seriously because my God, I can be replaced by 20,000 other people that will do it 10,000 times better than I would. Anything I do can be done better by someone else. So I try to inhabit the creative space very lightly. That allows me to have more fun. It allows me to really engage in a sense of play because when I'm inhabiting that world of delight and possibility and imagination, that's when the real magic comes out. So I just
yeah.
really urge people to don't take it so seriously. Because I'm sure you've met artists. They take things so seriously, their art becomes constricted. It becomes static. It becomes,
Uh,
it doesn't move anymore. There's no sense of movement. And from start to finish, art is about movement because it's eternally about change and evolution and becoming. And so
yeah.
we as artists are supposed to bring that becoming into the world. And so yeah, so that's my little blurb.
Yeah. The becoming, I think, is the highlighted word for this conversation. And I think it's fantastic for us to be able to close out with that word. One of the things that I always want to remind the audience at the end of each one of these conversations is always listen to your heart, but in the same breath, be kind to your mind.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.